When the United States Marine Corps, when the United States of America asked me to go to Iraq to serve my country, I did it. I did what they asked me to do it, and I did it honorably, and I'm very proud of that service. When Tim Walz was asked by his country to go to Iraq, you know what he did? He dropped out of the Army and allowed his unit to go without him, a fact that he's been criticized for aggressively by a lot of the people that he served with. I think it's shameful.
J.D. Vance has criticized him as never having been in combat. And,
has he?
Has he? Well,
has J.D. Vance been in combat?
Well, I think he was over in Iraq, I think.
If I may,
sure.
The campaign trail. Today, Senator J.D. Vance has accused Governor Walz of stolen valor. I mean, obviously, military service is something that's very deeply personal to the president, given the service of his son. I'm curious, I mean, how is he reacting to these statements?
So look, any specific attacks or comments, I would have to refer you to the campaign. I think when I was answering your colleague Joey's question about Governor Walz, I laid out, and you all have seen his bio, right? This is someone who enlisted at 17 years old to serve his country. He was part of the Army National Guard for 24 years. This is someone who was a high school teacher, right? A high school coach as well, who grew up in a small town in the Midwest. And so I think his bio speaks for itself. Who he is speaks for himself. His record speaks for itself. And I'm just not going to say anything beyond that.
Vance is pointing out two things. Number one, that Walz basically left his unit, which no one really disputes, in 2005 before that unit was set to be deployed to Iraq. The fact that he did not go serve in Iraq, which J.D. Vance himself did, albeit as a public affairs officer in the U.S. Marines, is a point that they are trying to make. And also, they're seizing on a comment that Walz has used in the past to suggest that certain weapons should not be in the hands of regular people. Weapons like what he carried in war is the quote from Walz. Vance seizing on that and saying, you were never in war, Tim Walz, so what are you talking about there? And the Harris campaign has responded to that too as well, pointing out that Walz both carried, trained, and is deeply familiar with the types of weapons we're talking about here, regardless of having never used them in combat.
And we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
I get the sense that the Harris campaign is ready for these attacks, but I have to tell you, Kristen, they're not engaging directly on whether or not he was falsifying his record, his military record. They are, of course, as you said, pointing out that he does have a history of service, both in the National Guard, but also as a teacher, as someone who was a governor, as someone who was a congressional member. So it's very interesting to see them say, yes, he does have a sort of a long history in the military and joined at 17, has trained people who did go into combat zones, is what one source told me, but also is not engaging directly on whether or not he falsified here.
Pulling me away from my position as Congresswoman. All you did was take some of the strings off. Because see, now I don't have to worry about some strings that I have attached, and as much as I love my job. But all they did was radicalize me, and so now they be afraid. AIPAC, I'm coming to tear your kingdom down.